I thought it was only me. As a single mother for 18 years while raising my daughter on my own, I received my bachelor's degree, started on my master's degree, purchased my first home at 27. I used to cut my own grass in the heat. I would set out the stinky trash, attempt to do some minor repairs. Sometimes I would work two jobs, other responsibility as a daughter and a sister and a friend. And while all these things could be taxing on me, I still thought they were all easier than attracting a loving and lasting relationship. Hello, I'm Marlena Cole. I'm the voice on the other end of the phone asking you all the personal questions about your love life. I'd like to take this time to thank you again for speaking with me and opening up to me and sharing your heart with me. In addition to trusting the person that introduced you to me without much question, I really appreciate that. And I've put this training together exclusively for the over 40 some women, that single ambitious women that I spoke with on the phone. And thank you to the guys as well. After connecting with all these single, wonderful, ambitious women, I noticed a constant theme on most of the calls that actually really excited me, if I can be honest. And what that theme was a few things, and the main thing is that they didn't feel that it was in their control or that they had any control over relationships and attracting relationships, healthy relationships, and potential marriage. And unlike me, when I was single, I was disappointed that my relationships never worked out the way I expected. The guy that I started, seeing or dating, sometimes they would get distance from me without reason or explanation or warning. And I was continuously stuck in a cycle of failed relationships. And I just felt as if I could not keep a man to save my life. And when I heard some of these similar things with the women on the phone, I got excited because I believe that I broke the code for attracting quality relationships. And I am just ecstatic to bring you some of those strategies that I used in my life and that I've shared with other women who implemented it in their life and have had amazing breakthroughs in their life and personal relationships. During this time when I just felt like I had no control over attracting a healthy relationship, I began to bury my head in the sand. I just felt like there's nothing I can do. It's not in my control. And so I'm just going to ignore that part of my life and not focus on it. And so I told you some of the things I did. I got education, I took certifications, I was just overextended at church and work and with my daughter, taking her and her friends everywhere they wanted to go. I was the Uber for my daughter even before Uber started for her and her friends. And I wouldn't even let the other parents take them sometimes. I would be like, no, I can do it. It's Saturday night. Go out, have fun, enjoy yourself. I don't have anything to do. And that was pretty much my Friday, Saturday for many, many years. But as far as I can remember, I wanted to be married. I remember my family telling me a story of when I was like 5 or 6 years old, I dialed London looking for my imaginary husband, Toby. And my parents were not very happy when they got the long distance bill. But for a person from the age 5 or 6 thinking about marriage, you can imagine that me burying my head in the sand and trying to not focus on my personal life or personal love life was not very sustainable. All my friends were getting married or in healthy relationships or committed relationships. And frankly, I was just tired of being single. I was just exhausted with being single. I was exhausted with dating. I felt like I was on my first 50 dates for like 13 years in a row. And I finally decided to do something about it. I became intentional about it. I had tried other things, read books, went to conferences, took poor advice from people, tried it on my own, just, without any plan, but just based on what I thought was dating and how I thought could bring forth a healthy relationship. And none of those things worked. It left me broken and disappointed. And that's not to say that there's not any good tips in the books and some of the conferences I went to, but they were all kind of disconnected. There was never really a plan of attack for me. It was never a strategy. It was never holistic for my life and for something that, okay, step one, step two, step three. It was more like, try this, go out and go to a restaurant and eat by yourself, or walk down Washington with a low cut shirt on. I don't know, just all kind of different tactics, right? Stand on your head and skip 2 times and it'll come. But none of those things worked. And so I began this journey of, being taught how to be a wife. And I don't want to get all into that too deep. And I'll be able to share my story with you hopefully another time. But I really want to bring this training to you. These strategies that I'm sharing, like I said, have worked in my life and are making breakthroughs in other people's lives that I know personally. So let's jump into it. This is what I created just for you, titled it Lift, Land, and Prepare, where we're going to be showing you some strategies that where you will know that you do have control to create the opportunities to attract a quality relationship and a potential spouse. You just haven't been introduced to them until now. Your mission, if you choose to accept, is 1, to challenge your belief framework, which may be a barrier to love and marriage. And your belief framework, or your BF, as I call it, is what you believe in. It's your belief system. It's your guiding principles. And we are limited by what we believe. If we don't believe that there's a road ahead, if we're driving, and we don't believe that the road will continue, we will stop and make a left turn or a right turn or go back the other way, because we believe that the road ahead of us does not continue to lead us to the path that we're desiring. And so we are limited by our beliefs. And that's a simple example, but and we're positioned, your mission is to position love relationships as a priority on your list of life goals. A lot of the women I spoke with, they rated their desire for marriage on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, if it happens, it happens, not really interested, to 10 being, absolutely, I'm so ready to be a wife. And the average score was about a 7 on, I'm ready to be married. But when I asked them later on in the conversation what was their list of life goals, marriage either did not make it on the list or was the last thing to be mentioned. And when I pointed that out, a lot of the ladies was like, and I said, well, should I decrease your rating for marriage? They was like, no. Let's redo those goals. And then marriage and family was on their goal list. So if your mission to position that love relationship at the top of your list, unapologetically. And 3, if you so choose to accept, to execute on the strategies and techniques in Lift, Land, and Prepare, and to start creating opportunities to attract quality relationships that can lead to marriage. I read something, and the lesson I took away was, innovation is praised, but execution is worshiped. And I'll leave that there. So let's continue. The strategy is, you are the key to attracting him, and you have more control over the timing than you realize. And I hope to bring that home to you. Lift, Land, and Prepare is built on the foundation of thinking of lifting barriers that are blocking you from taking personal accountability from your future, your heart desires coming to fruition. And you may at this point not even know what those barriers are. And so hopefully we can work through those and identify those. And land, positioning relationships for mutual beneficial impact to you and to others. And we'll get in that in phase 2 of this training. And prepare, we have an accountability and a responsibility to make room for a healthy relationship in our lives. And we cannot expect for it to just fall out of thin air. We have to make room for it in our hearts and our minds and our schedules. But I believe it starts in our minds, and then in our hearts, and then in our actions. The 3 keys to creating the opportunity. Your opportunity, your the can be just a casual relationship or a committed relationship or ultimately marriage. And the 3 keys we'll be introducing is forgive and release in the first training, guard your heart in the second training, and he who finds a wife in the third training. I coined this term that I love. I believe I coined it. I've never read it anywhere else. Is that I created it, God honored and supplied it. And so for me, when I say I created it, it's like the opportunity is what I'm speaking of. And so I had to go get my son a pair of cleats. He's going to be playing t-ball a few weeks ago. And my husband told me about a store on the street that I drive on almost every day to take my son to school. And as I put in I couldn't think of picture the store on the street. And I was like, okay, give me the address. And I followed my GPS to the store. And when I pulled up to the store, I'm like, oh my God, I pass by here every day. When did the store appear? So when I got into the store, I asked the sales lady, how long have you been here? Is this a new store? She was like, oh no, they've been here for over 15, 20 years. And I was just floored because how long had that opportunity been there? And I did not see it. And it only presented itself when I had a need, when I created the need for the opportunity. So hopefully you could follow that example of creating the opportunity. And it gave me comfort when I was single that I knew one thing for sure, that if God had a husband for me, that there was a husband out there for me, that he had already been born. He was alive. I was in my 20s, so he had to be alive. And so I just needed the opportunity to meet him. And I knew when I met him that we would connect and, happy ending, right? Whatever. That did eventually happen. So I just say again, I created and you will create it. God will honor and supply it. And I believe these 3 keys will be the catalyst for that opportunity. Forgive and release is our first lesson. And the strategy is keep the lesson, leave the experience. Forgive and release. I want to read the definition first of forgive and release. Forgive is to cease to feel resentment against. And I have to honestly say here that I put forgive and release because I didn't want people barriers to go up. But what I really wanted to put was forgive and forget. But I know that for most of us, there is a concept or belief framework that we should forgive, but never forget. And so let me read you the definition of forget. Forget, to fail to become mindful at the proper time. To forget is to fail to become mindful at the proper time. Forgive and forget is what I really want to say. But I'll put it, forgive and release. So keep the lesson, leave the experience. I do not know where I learned this concept of forgive but don't forget. But years ago, I realized that it was actually this concept was hindering me from what I really wanted in my relationships. And as I began to challenge this belief, I came to the conclusion that people teach forgive but don't forget because and it could be a multitude of reasons, but I picked out 7. They're still hurt by their past. They become bitter. They're afraid to trust themselves again or anyone else fully. They're ill-equipped to heal and move forward. They're self-sabotagers. They're too afraid to succeed. Or like me, they just accepted this as the gospel. And I began to challenge this because I could just see some of the problems it would cause. And what I reframed this with was forgive and release, because I can keep the lesson and leave the experience. And I'll use this example, this analogy. When I read books, I love to read. So I read 2 to 3 books, probably in a week and a half time frame, where it's either audio, ebook, or physical hard book. And what I do, I think I become a master at reading books. What I do is when I read or listen to a book, I take notes. I type up notes when I'm reading or write notes when I'm reading. And after I finish reading the book, I put it away. my bookshelf, or store the ebook in my email somewhere. And I typically don't really go back, and I keep the notes in the folders. And so I'll refer back to my folder, my binder of notes. And what I'm doing is I'm keeping the lesson and not the experience. The experience is being who wrote it, who referred the book to me, how great the book was. I could not tell you. I have to go dig through my library of books to tell you what's the latest books I've read, because I'm really just concerned with the lesson. I take the lesson and I leave the experience. And so going into this training, this is going to probably be challenging some of your belief frameworks and things that you live by. And you may fall somewhere in those 7 things of why you choose to live by forgive and don't forget, because maybe you're still hurt. Maybe you're afraid. Maybe that experience caused you to not trust yourself or trust your intuition, or have made you bitter in your heart. And so if you can open up your hearts and minds to forgive and release as we walk through this training, I would really appreciate that. And right now you have nothing to lose, right? This is a safe zone. And I'm going to demonstrate to you through a real story of my own on how I had to really let go of this forgive and don't forget. And so the theory here, or the concept, is thoughts lead to feelings. Feelings leads to emotions. Thoughts leads to feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions leads to action. This here is the circle, what I call the circle of life. And remember this, because I'll reintroduce this to you later on. And in the circle of life is where relationships lies on these lines. And within our circle of life is our heart and our inner circle. And it's also the unforgotten issues of our heart, as well as the joys and pains. And it's just the well springs of life that's within our heart. And so this one guy I dated for 7 years, he was here. He was in my heart. I absolutely loved and adored him. We dated on and off for about 7 years. And honestly, hindsight being 2020, I'm not sure if he really loved me or even liked me. Maybe he liked me, but I cared deeply about him and chose to ignore every sign in the world that he was not the right one for me. I was able to take him back so many times because, for one, I hoped it get better. And 2, I forgave him. I ceased to hold that resentment that was in my heart towards his actions towards me. And so I was able to take him back. Eventually, it got old. We ended the relationship. I was able to move on. But I was still living under the guiding principle of forgive. Don't feel that anger and resentment towards them. That's really what forgiving is. And don't forget, which is basically saying you have to be mindful at the proper time of what happened, of what failed, of what went wrong, is basically what forgive and don't forget is telling us. And so in this relationship, he dated other women. He lied about it and other things. He was never really dependable, always late, or didn't show up at all. And so anytime after this relationship was over, any situation, whether it was a guy I was dating or just one of my girlfriends or my friend girls, at work, it just didn't matter who it was, but any slight hint of them lying, or in a relationship, if I thought maybe they were cheating or they weren't going to follow through, I didn't wait to see the outcome. The thought of that immediately triggered a feeling, an unconscious feeling at a very cellular level in my heart and in my mind of rejection or abandonment and disappointment. I didn't necessarily think, oh, this is the same thing that, the 7-year guy did, but it just automatically just made me feel like, oh, I'm going to be rejected again, or, I'm going to be abandoned again. And it was like an unconscious feeling and an emotion that sometimes very overwhelming. anytime something similar, because I was living under the guiding principle of forgive, but don't forget that you were cheated on. Don't forget you were lied to. Don't forget you had somebody not follow through. And the feeling that that was telling me to remember and to recall at a moment's notice, remember that forget means to fail to become mindful at the proper time. So they told me, don't forget. So I had to remember to be mindful of what he did and how that made me feel at that time. And what it made me feel was rejected and abandoned and disappointed. And it made me react. Again, this is another unconscious cellular level reaction, meaning I didn't intentionally think about it. The thought just popped in my mind, or the feeling just popped in my mind. And automatically my body went into, my emotions went into defense mode. I was ready to fight, or I was ready to break up. I dumped so many people because of what I thought they were about to do, because of something way back here that happened years before. Or I became angry and very judgmental of them. And that was my reaction, and unconscious reaction, and how I physically acted, because of thoughts lead to feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotion leads to actions. My action was to be aggressive in my questions. Where are you? Where have you been? I thought you was coming at such and such time. You told me, blah, blah, blah. Or I began to look at flaws, or be like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm breaking up. I'm moving on. Or I became silent, which is just another form of resistance and another form of fleeing or fighting. I didn't even express how I felt. I just got quiet, right? And I can recall a relationship right after I dated the 7-year guy. I was excited. I was moving on with my life. And the cycle began to play out in my life. So one day we had a date plan. I was excited. I was putting my makeup, getting super cute, had found somebody to watch my daughter, and he didn't show up. He didn't call. He was late, it was probably 30 minutes. I'm like, where is he? And immediately it triggered something in my mind, and I felt like, I'm not going through this again, been there, done that. I felt a fear of rejection and abandonment. I was disappointed. I mean, automatically, I didn't know what the situation was. So what did I do? Fight or flight. I got angry, called him, got very judgmental, and assumed that he was doing something, right? He was cheating, right? He was lying. He was not coming through. That's what I assumed. So I called his cell phone. He didn't answer. I left a message. I was going off. If you didn't want to come, you should have said so. You could have called. A phone call doesn't hurt anybody, right? And so the outcome of that, he called me the next day, and he was upset. And he said, actually, I got into a car accident. I was in the hospital. I'm fine now. Thanks for asking, right? And he was like, when have I ever gave you a reason not to trust me? When have I ever not shown up? When the time that I have been late, which is very few and in between, I called and let you know. Why wasn't your first thought of concern for me? Why was it that I was doing something wrong, right? As you can imagine, outcome, don't need to be a palm reader to know what happened. We end up breaking up. And what that outcome did was it gave me what I did not want, delayed desires, and put me back in this cycle of failed relationships. And I was sabotaging my own relationships. And that cycle continued on and on for many years, because I was living under the guiding principles of forgive and don't forget. And I had to make a conscious decision to change that framework and take the lesson and not the experience. And the lesson that I took away from the 7-year experience and the guy I dated after him is, for the 7-year guys, that, you know what? I don't have to settle for less because of whatever reason. I don't have to take whatever anybody's dishing me. I deserve to be loved and respected and honored. And I deserve transparency in the relationship. And those are now the lessons I carry with me. Those are now my guiding principles, that yes, I do deserve to be loved, that I have something to offer someone. I don't have to be afraid of somebody walking away. If you're walking away, that's probably the best thing for you and the best thing for me. And so now I have that confidence to live my life to the fullest, to build relationships and to build bridges and not walls, because I'm no longer carrying that hurt from that 7-year relationship or any other relationship in my past. I take the lesson and I leave that experience with them. They can have it, they can keep it. I'm moving forward in a positive concept of forgive and release, which serves me for where I am now in my life. And I just believe that anything short of true forgiveness and forgetting, which is ceasing to feel resentment against and failing to become mindful at the proper time that you were hurt, anything short of that, I believe, leaves you stuck. And it leaves you stuck in prison. It leaves you stuck right in your past, right in that moment when you felt that, when you found out that they lied, or when you found out that they cheated on you, or it leaves you stuck right in that moment when they began to withdraw from you with no reason or explanation, because you're failing to forget, because we were taught that. But I'm just here to challenge that, and I have challenged it, and I'm asking you to challenge it, because maybe it's serving you well and maybe it's not. I would bet that it's not serving you well, and that it's keeping you in this cycle of failed relationships, and it's serving you to bury your head in the sand and make up sexy excuses of why you're not actively and intentionally pursuing your personal life. And that's not pursuing a man, but that's being intentional about making your personal life just as successful as your professional life. And so anything of that leaves you in prison. Forgive and releases you. It does just that. It releases you from that memory of what happened. It releases you from being in that moment again where this person has hurt you and already off into life and forgot all about it. But it releases you to create the life that you want. It releases you to create the opportunities to find love. And let me take that back. It releases you to create the opportunities to attract love and a healthy relationship and marriage, and for you to be your authentic self, and so much more, and so much more. I choose to forgive and release. I encourage you to be courageous enough to forgive and release. And I'm in the next couple trainings, I'm going to give you more on how you can forgive and release and be safe, and it'll all tie in together. But right now, even if you can't accept this right now, I say accept it. You come up with your own reframing. You can use mine. Take the lesson and leave the experience. And if you're not quite there ready to forgive and release, and you're still like, I'm not too sure, stick with me. Just be aware of how this keeps us in bondage. Stick with me through the next 2 trainings, and we'll work through how you can forgive and release. To summarize the lesson, keep the lesson and leave the experience. Thoughts leads to feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotion leads to actions. And 3, it is within your control to create the opportunity for a healthy, loving, long-lasting relationship and marriage. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love, love, love to hear from you. Let me know your top 3 takeaways. Tell me how you're going to implement them, how you're going to execute. Remember, innovation is praise and execution is worship. What do you disagree with and why? What are you struggling with? Is that a concept that you just can't release right now? Share your suggestions on how I can improve the training for more impact. Email me, marlenarcole@gmail.com.